lived in these woods for most of my life. Some folks move here for peace and quiet, others for hunting, some just to get away from the noise of town. For me, it was always about the rhythm of the trees. You spend long enough surrounded by them and you start to hear it, the sway of the branches in the wind, the way the leaves scrape against each other like whispering voices, the owls calling out at night as if they're checking on you. Out here, that becomes your heartbeat. My cabin sits back a mile from the nearest dirt road. It isn't fancy, just wood and nails, a metal roof that rattles when the storms roll through, and a front porch that's seen more seasons than I can count. I built a workshop about 20 feet off to the side, nothing special, just a shed where I fix up tools, sand down old furniture, and tinker with whatever scraps come my way. And then there's Ozzy. Ozzy's my dog, my shadow, my guardian angel if you believe in such things. He's a big, rust-colored shepherd mix, the kind of dog that looks like he'd rip your throat out but would rather flop on the porch and roll in the sun. He's steady, unshakable. I've seen him stare down coyotes without so much as a whimper. And when storms howl and thunder shakes the windows, he barely lifts his head. That's why what happened that night still rattles me to this day. It was late, about 11. I'd lost track of time in the workshop, sanding down an old rocking chair I'd found by the creek. When I finally put my tools away, I figured I'd step outside for a smoke before bed. The air was cool, carrying that damp, earthy smell the forest always gets after dark. Ozzy padded out beside me, tail wagging lazily, same as always. I lit up, lined against the doorframe, and stared out at the line of trees. They looked different at night, taller somehow, like they leaned closer to listen. I've always thought the woods at night weren't empty at all, just quieter about what they were doing. I might have been standing there 2 minutes when it happened. Ozzy fro. No warning, no slow build, just stiff as a board, ears pricked, hackles rising like a brush fire down his spine. A low growl seeped out of his throat, the kind that makes your skin crawl because you know it isn't meant for you. His eyes were locked on the dark line of the forest, unblinking, focused. "What is it, boy?" I whispered, but my voice already felt too loud. That's when the woods woke up. I swear to you, it sounded like 50 men were tearing through the trees all at once. Branches cracked, undergrowth snapped, and the ground seemed to shake with pounding footsteps. It wasn't just one direction, it was everywhere all around us, closing in fast. My cigarette slipped out of my fingers and hissed out in the dirt. Ozzy lunged closer to me, growl rising into a bark, deep and panicked, something I'd never heard from him before. I stumbled back inside the workshop, heart hammering, and grabbed the flashlight off the bench. My hands were trembling, but I managed to flick it on. The beam cut through the night, slicing across the trees. Nothing, just shadow, just leaves moving in the breeze. But the sound didn't stop. If anything, it grew louder, branches breaking like bones, feet pounding the earth, closing in. I thought of bears, maybe a whole pack of them. But bears don't move like that. I thought of people, a group of men maybe hunting or drunk and lost. But no one lived out here. No one would have reason to gather in my woods at this hour. And then I heard it. Not footsteps this time. Not branches breaking. Voices. Soft, high-pitched voices. They weren't speaking words I could recognize. It sounded like baby talk. Garbled syllables, nonsense, like a toddler learning how to form sounds. But there were dozens of them, overlapping, circling us, rising and falling as if they were talking to each other. Ozzy pressed against my leg so hard I nearly lost my balance. His teeth bared, but his tail was tucked, his whole body trembling. That's when fear sank its teeth into me, because if Ozzy was scared, I knew I should be terrified. I swung the flashlight beam left to right, scanning desperately between the trees, but the voices danced just out of reach. They came from everywhere at once, behind me, ahead of me, close to my ear one moment and then far away the next. My mouth was dry, hands slick with sweat on the flashlight handle. "Who's out there?" I shouted, my voice cracking in a way that embarrassed me even as terror crawled up my spine. No answer. Just that broken baby chatter rising into giggles, then dropping back to murmurs. And suddenly silence. Like someone had flipped a switch, the woods fell dead quiet. I stood frozen in the workshop doorway, flashlight beam trembling across the trees. My ears strained for anything at all. But the woods were suddenly as quiet as a church at midnight. Not a cricket, not a breeze, not even the usual rustle of night animals. And in that silence, my heart sounded like a drum. I swallowed hard and forced myself to breathe. "Come on, Ozzy," I whispered, my voice shaking. I didn't even need to tug his collar. He bolted through the door ahead of me, tail tucked low, straight into the cabin. I slammed the workshop door shut and ran after him. Inside the cabin, I locked every door, slid the bolt across the back entrance, even dragged a chair under the front knob. Ozzy had wedged himself against the wall, chest heaving, eyes still on the window as if he could see something I could. I tried to laugh it off. "Probably just deer spooked up the ridge," I muttered, but even saying it aloud, I didn't believe it. I've heard deer stampede before. I've heard bears crash through undergrowth. Whatever that was outside, it wasn't animal. The minutes dragged. I sat there in the dim light of the oil lamp, Ozzy glued to my side, every nerve wound so tight I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. And then the crunch of gravel. Right outside the window. I froze. Someone or something was walking the length of my cabin. Slow, deliberate, crunch, crunch, crunch. Ozzy let out a low, warning growl deep in his chest. His eyes never left the window, though I dared not look. My flashlight was still in my hand, but suddenly I didn't want to use it. I didn't want to see. The footsteps paused. For one horrible second, I thought I heard breathing, ragged, shallow, just beyond the glass. My throat tightened. I raised the flashlight, ready to shine it out, and then the sound moved on. Crunch, crunch, crunch around the corner of the cabin, fading, then gone. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. That's when the whispering started again. Faint at first, like the wind brushing through leaves. But it wasn't the wind. It rose and fell in uneven tones, circling the cabin the same way the footsteps had. Dozens of voices, childlike, broken. It's hard to describe the way it felt. Not like someone talking to me, but talking about me. Like I was a word they couldn't pronounce, a name they repeated over and over until it lost all meaning. I pressed my palms to my ears, but it didn't stop. If anything, it got louder inside my head. My grandfather used to tell me stories when I was a boy, tales about the small folk of the mountains. He said some weren't friendly. Mischief makers, tricksters, or worse. At the time, I'd laughed them off, just mountain superstitions. But sitting there in my cabin, heart slamming against my ribs, those stories didn't feel so far-fetched anymore. The whispers turned to giggles. High, sharp little laughs bouncing from wall to wall. Ozzy barked, then snapped his teeth at the window, his whole body trembling. And then silence again. The cabin seemed to hold its breath. The lamp flame flickered, throwing shadows across the walls. For a moment I thought I saw movement in the glass, something pale, something small. But when I whipped the flashlight toward it, the window reflected only my own wide, frightened eyes. The rest of the night was a blur of half-sleep and jolts awake. Every creak of the floorboards felt like footsteps, every sigh of the wind like breath on the back of my neck. At some point, exhaustion won, and I must have dozed off in the chair with Ozzy at my feet, both of us too afraid to move. I woke to the sound of scratching. At first, I thought it was a dream, that hazy moment when you're halfway between sleep and waking. But then Ozzy's growl cut through the fog in my head, low and urgent, and I realized it was real. The noise was coming from the front door. Not like claws, not like nails, more like little fingers. Dragging slowly down the wood, up and down, again and again. My mouth went dry. I reached for the shotgun propped against the wall, hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped it. Ozzy was at the door now, teeth bared, every muscle taut as a bowstring. His bark exploded in the stillness, sharp and violent, but the scratching didn't stop. I shouted loud, desperate, "Get the hell away from here." My voice cracked in the silence. For a heartbeat, everything went still. Then came the laughter. It wasn't outside anymore. It was everywhere. High-pitched, broken giggles filled the cabin, seeping out of the walls, out of the floorboards, out of my own skull. It rose higher, faster, overlapping until it was a shriek of nonsense words and childish laughter, circling us like a storm. I stumbled back, shotgun raised, finger trembling on the trigger. Ozzy barked and barked, but even he sounded drowned out. My chest ached with panic, my vision tunneling. And then just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The silence slammed down like a weight. My ears rang in the emptiness. I could hear Ozzy panting, hear my own ragged breath, feel the sweat dripping down my spine. I don't know how long I stood there, gun raised, waiting for something to crash through the door. Minutes, hours, eventually exhaustion won. I slid down the wall, the shotgun still across my lap, and sat there in the gray light of early dawn. When the sun finally pushed its way through the trees, I opened the door. The morning air felt like a blessing. The yard was empty. The forest was still. No footprints in the dirt. No sign of anything having been there at all. But Ozzy wouldn't step outside. He stood stiff at the threshold, eyes fixed on the tree line, tail tucked so tight it nearly touched his belly. That was enough for me. I don't go near that side of the woods anymore. Haven't since that night. And Ozzy, he still refuses to. If I even walk toward the workshop after dark, he whines and blocks the path like he's protecting me from something I can't see. Maybe it was just my imagination. Maybe the woods play tricks at night, making shadows where there are none, whispers where there should only be wind. But deep down, I know better. I heard them, and they heard me. I'd always been drawn to the hollers. Something about the way the mountains cradled those narrow valleys, the thick forests pressing in like silent sentinels, made me feel alive. Most people would call it isolation, I called it peace. The roads were rough, mostly dirt and gravel, winding between steep hills and choked with weeds. No one came here unless they had to, and I liked it that way. That morning the air had a chill that crawled under your skin, even with the late summer sun overhead. Fog clung to the ground in thick, ghostly patches, curling around the bases of the trees. I was on my ATV, carrying tools and supplies for a small project in the holler, a clearing I was trying to keep somewhat manageable. My dog Bear trotted beside me, ears alert, sniffing every scent the forest offered. I'd been down this path dozens of times before, yet that day the woods seemed different. Not in a way I could put my finger on, just a heaviness in the air, a silence too deep. No birds, no wind. Even the cicadas, normally relentless, had stopped. Bear stiffened, low growl rumbling from his chest. Up ahead, something caught my eye. A small shed rusted and leaning to one side, half hidden by undergrowth. I hadn't noticed it before, not that I remembered. The paint had peeled long ago, leaving bare wood streaked with mildew, but someone had scrawled letters across the front, "Rest in pieces." I slowed my ATV and squinted at it. The words were crude, almost childlike, yet deliberate. A shiver ran down my spine. Weird, I muttered, thinking perhaps some kids had been here messing around. But deep down, I knew this wasn't playful graffiti. Something about the jagged letters, the way they seemed to glare at me, made my stomach twist. I dismounted and approached cautiously. The door hung slightly ajar, squealing softly as it swayed in the slight breeze, or maybe it hadn't been a breeze at all. I pushed it open, expecting a dark, empty interior. What I found instead made me freeze. Inside were figures. Not alive, not human, but disturbingly lifelike. Dummies perhaps, or ragged mannequins someone had dressed in old clothes. They hung from the rafters and leaned against walls, some with masks over their faces, clowns, grotesque smiles painted across their pale features. Others were made from sheets stitched crudely, with black buttons for eyes. The smell hit me next, damp, rotting wood mixed with something metallic. Blood, I couldn't tell. The figures swayed slightly, as if breathing in the dim light filtering through the cracks. One even had a rusty saw blade dangling from its neck like a grotesque necklace, swinging slowly as though someone had just let go. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a broken chair. Bear whined, his hackles raised, eyes fixed on a corner of the shed. There, a plywood board had been nailed crudely against the wall. On it, baby dolls hung by their necks, their faces cracked, eyes staring emptily. Beneath them, machetes were planted tip first into the dirt, their blades glinting faintly. I couldn't breathe. My mind screamed at me to run, but my feet felt glued to the ground. Something about the arrangement felt intentional. Someone had gone to great lengths to create this gallery of horrors. And yet no one was here. A sudden gust of wind or something moving rattled the shed. I spun around, heart hammering, but saw nothing. Bear growled low, a sound that cut through the silence like a warning. My instincts screamed, "Get out." No. I turned back to the figures, and for a fleeting second, I thought one had moved. Maybe it was my eyes, or maybe the fog outside had shifted just right. My pulse raced. I reached for my flashlight, hands trembling. The beam caught another figure, this one hanging by ropes from the ceiling, swaying slowly as though some invisible hand was rocking it. I stumbled back again, nearly toppling the ATV. My rational mind tried to calm me. It's just dummies. Someone's sick idea of art. Nothing alive in here. But the primal part of me, the part that knows the woods remember things, that senses when you are trespassing in places you don't belong, screamed that I was wrong. I heard it then, a faint whisper, almost imperceptible. Just one, but unmistakable. Somewhere in the shadow of the trees outside, a voice breathed my name. I spun, flashlight sweeping over the undergrowth. Nothing, only the fog curling through the holler. But that whisper, it had come from the forest, not the shed. I jumped back onto my ATV, Bear scrambling behind me, fur bristled. My hands shook as I tried to start the engine. The air felt heavy, like it pressed down on my shoulders. I glanced back at the shed one last time, and in the dim morning light, I thought I saw a figure move at the edge of the trees. A shadow too tall to be human, too deliberate to be the wind. I didn't wait to find out. I floored the throttle, mud flying, heart pounding, Bear yelping beside me. The holler stretched endlessly ahead, yet every twist of the road felt like a trap, every tree a looming sentinel. And as I sped away, the first unsettling certainty took hold. I hadn't just stumbled upon something strange. I had walked straight into a nightmare someone had been building for years. And it wasn't finished yet. The deeper I drove into the holler, the thicker the fog became, curling around the trees and turning familiar shapes into twisted shadows. Every twist of the trail felt wrong, as if the forest itself had shifted while I wasn't looking. Branches scraped against the ATV, leaving jagged, claw-like marks in the morning mist. Bear growled low, his body rigid, eyes darting into the gray haze. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it. That dummies in a shed were alive. That whisper I thought I'd heard was just the wind. But something about this place felt deliberate, like the trees themselves were watching, waiting. Then I saw them, figures hanging from the trees. Not mannequins this time, not dolls, but rough human shapes, their outlines stitched crudely from old clothes and burlap, swinging gently in the breeze. Some wore masks, some clownish, some grotesque faces with black holes for eyes. I could see saw blades glinting from some, machetes embedded at odd angles in the ground beneath others. Their arms, twisted unnaturally, pointed toward me, as though warning me to turn back. A shiver ran down my spine. I killed the ATV and sat frozen, listening. The forest had fallen completely silent. No wind, no birds, no distant animals, just the soft creaking of the dangling figures. And then a sound from deeper in the trees. A slow, deliberate footstep. I froze, not an animal. Too heavy, too deliberate. Another step, then another. They weren't walking randomly, they were pacing, circling. My pulse hammered against my ribs as I gripped the handlebars, knuckles white. Bear growled, his hackles raised higher than ever. I turned the flashlight toward the noise. The beam cut through the fog in a narrow cone, illuminating broken dolls strewn across the forest floor. Some had missing limbs, others' faces cracked, eyes staring blankly. My stomach churned, bile rising in my throat. And then I saw it, a movement at the edge of the fog. Something tall, impossibly thin, with long limbs, leaning just out of reach of the light. Its head tilted unnaturally, as if studying me. I blinked and it vanished. My rational mind screamed, "It's a trick of the fog. It's just the morning mist." But my gut told me otherwise. I tried to back up slowly, but the ATV sputtered. I hit the throttle, spinning the tires in the mud. The figures in the trees seemed to sway closer. Shadows moved where there should have been none. And then I heard it, a whisper, soft but unmistakable, threading through the trees, curling around me like smoke. Turned back, I whipped my head around. Nothing, only the fog and the swaying dummies. But the whisper repeated, closer, more insistent. Turn back, panic set in. I realized I had gone too far. Whatever had been waiting here, whatever had arranged this gallery of horrors, it wasn't meant to be seen. Not by anyone. My heart raced, breath catching in my throat. Bear whimpered, refusing to move, ears flat. I started riding again, faster this time, tires skidding in the wet mud. Every shadow seemed to lunge toward me, every tree a looming, watching figure. And then up ahead I saw it, a plywood board nailed between two trees. Dozens of baby dolls hung there, their faces cracked, mouths twisted into silent screams. Rusted saw blades and machetes were embedded into the ground beneath them. I couldn't stop looking even as I passed it because something about the scene, it felt alive. Something moved behind the board. Something tall, dark, shifting just beyond my vision. I felt its eyes on me, burning into my back. My hands shook, gripping the handlebars so tight the knuckles went white. Every instinct screamed at me to run. I floored the ATV. Mud sprayed across the trail as I barreled forward. Branches whipped my face. Bear barked wildly, but even his voice sounded tiny against the oppressive silence that had descended once more. The whispering came again. This time multiple voices overlapping, high-pitched, garbled. They weren't human. Not really. They were taunting, circling me, riding the wind as if the forest itself had teeth. I slammed my hands on the handlebars, trying to ignore it, trying to focus on the path ahead. But something brushed past my shoulder, cold, wet, and heavy, like fingers sliding along my skin. I jerked forward instinctively, heart leaping into my throat. Bear yelped beside me, and I knew I wasn't imagining it. The forest seemed endless. Every corner of the trail looked the same, yet every shadow seemed to harbor something just out of reach. I dared not stop, dared not look behind me. The fog thickened, clinging to the trees, making them loom impossibly tall. Something followed, something patient, waiting for me to falter. And then I saw it, a shape directly on the path ahead. Tall, thin, impossibly still. Its head tilted at a strange angle, limbs like bent twigs. Its eyes black holes, empty and endless, locked on me. I swerved hard, mud flying, my heart hammering so violently I thought it might burst from my chest. When I looked back, it was gone. Only the fog and the grotesque dummies hanging in the trees remained. But I knew it had been real. I knew it had watched me. And I knew I would never forget that moment. The path twisted endlessly, the fog pressing against me like a living thing. Every shadow seemed to twitch, bend, and stretch in ways that defied logic. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears, every beat echoing in the silence of the holler. Bear stayed close, tail tucked, hackles raised, growling low at shapes that my eyes couldn't always see. Then I saw movement off the side of the trail. Something crouched low behind a tree, impossibly thin, limbs bent at unnatural angles. Its face was hidden in shadow, but I felt it watching. Every instinct screamed to turn and run, but I knew I had no choice. My ATV tires slipped in the mud as I tried to accelerate. The whispers returned. Many voices this time, not far off but surrounding me. Soft, warped syllables blending together into a chorus of menace. You shouldn't be here, leave, leave. They carried a tone that made my skin crawl, mocking, hungry, and impossibly patient. I dared not respond. I dared not look back. Branches whipped at my face, tearing at my clothes, clawing at my skin. My flashlight had fallen from the handlebar when I swerved, rolling somewhere in the mud. Darkness swallowed the path, leaving me to rely on instinct. But every turn felt like it looped back into the same area, as though the holler itself had reshaped itself to trap me. Then I saw them, figures, dozens of them, emerging from the fog. Hanging dummies, masked faces, dangling baby dolls, rusted blades glinting in the gray light. Some swayed from the trees, others crouched along the trail, hands extended as though to grab me. I slammed the throttle, mud spraying in all directions, tires spinning over roots and rocks, adrenaline screaming in my veins. A figure stepped into my path, a tall, impossibly thin shadow. Its head tilted at an unnatural angle, and I swear I saw its mouth move, forming words without sound. I swerved, narrowly avoiding a jagged tree, and my mind screamed at me to escape. Go, go, I yelled, voice raw, throat burning. Bear barked fiercely, yelps and snarls echoing in the holler. But the forest didn't echo my words. It swallowed them, twisting them into whispers that mocked me. Branches scratched at my arms, mud coated my legs, and every nerve in my body screamed. I passed another board of baby dolls, their cracked faces staring into nothing, mouths frozen in silent screams. A machete lay embedded in the mud, glinting faintly. I glanced at it and almost lost control. It felt like eyes were following me from every angle, the forest itself alive, breathing, hungry. Then came the smell, a metallic tang that made my stomach churn. Blood rot, I couldn't tell. Whatever it was, it thickened the air, clinging to my skin, filling my nostrils, making it impossible to breathe normally. Bear whimpered but stayed at my side, refusing to leave, a silent companion in the madness surrounding us. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, forming words that weren't quite human. Join us, stay, never leave. Each syllable burned into my mind, clawing at sanity. My hands shook so violently, I could barely grip the handlebars. My eyes darted to the fog, trying to find the source of the voices, the watchers, the horrors, but the mist only thickened, hiding them, teasing me with glimpses at the edge of perception. And then I saw it, something larger, darker, moving faster than the fog allowed. A shadow lunged from the undergrowth, limbs stretching impossibly long. I jerked the ATV to the side, narrowly missing the thing as it swiped through the path. I could feel it graze me, cold, wet, and heavy, like fingers sliding along my skin. Bear leaped, snapping at it, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. I didn't stop, couldn't stop. I floored the throttle, tires churning mud, heart pounding so violently it felt like it might burst. The holler twisted endlessly ahead, the trail looping and folding in ways that made no sense. I felt trapped in a nightmare where the forest had become alive, malevolent, and intent on keeping me. Minutes or hours passed in a blur. The whispers receded, replaced by an oppressive silence that pressed down on me like stone. And then, just as suddenly as it began, I emerged onto the edge of the holler. Sunlight pierced the fog, washing over the familiar ridges, trees, and dirt road. The oppressive weight lifted slightly, though my chest heaved and my hands shook uncontrollably. Bear collapsed beside me, panting, ears flat, eyes wide and fearful. I slid off the ATV, knees weak, and looked back toward the holler. The fog had lifted just enough to reveal the shed and the twisted gallery of figures. But they were gone. No dummies, no dolls, no saw blades or masks. The forest seemed calm again, peaceful, as if it had never been anything else. I wanted to tell myself it was over, that it had been my imagination, that I had been alone. But the memory of those black, endless eyes, the whispers that had clawed at my mind, and the feeling of unseen limbs brushing my skin, I knew better. Something in that holler had followed me, or at least had been patient enough to let me leave this time. I didn't return. I never went back to that hollowed valley. Even talking about it makes my stomach twist and my chest tighten. The road, the shed, the fog, the whispers, they're all burned into my memory. Sometimes at night I hear it. A faint whisper carried on the wind. A soft giggle from the forest. I can't explain it, can't reason with it. But I know the truth, the holler remembers. And it doesn't forgive. I've spent most of my life in the Appalachian Mountains of eastern Tennessee. Hunting isn't just a pastime out here, it's a way of life. I grew up with a rifle in my hands and a pack of coonhounds at my heels. There's a rhythm to it, the rustle of leaves, the snap of twigs, the distant calls of owls and raccoons. You learn to read the forest the way others read a newspaper. Every sound has meaning, every shadow a story. That night, my buddies and I had gone up Jellicoe Mountain for a late-night raccoon hunt. The air was thick and cold, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine. Mist clung to the valleys, curling like smoke around the trees. I've been hunting these hills for decades, and I knew every ridge and hollow. Yet as the sun dipped behind the peaks and the shadows lengthened, an uneasy feeling settled over me. Something wasn't right. We had a good group with us, 10 men in total, all seasoned hunters, all armed with rifles and flashlights. Our coonhounds were restless, noses to the ground, tails stiff, growling low at points where nothing seemed to be. At first, I chalked it up to the chill and the fog. Dogs get jumpy in the dark. But there's a difference between nervous and terrified, and these dogs were definitely in the latter category. I remember the first sign clearly. A low, guttural growl that didn't come from any of the dogs. It was deeper than a hound could manage, vibrating in the night air, echoing off the ridges. I froze, heart hammering. "Easy, boys," I whispered to the dogs, though my voice sounded too loud, too harsh in the quiet. The others glanced at me, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. We continued, our flashlights sweeping across the dense undergrowth. The trees loomed like silent sentinels, shadows twisting in unnatural ways in the beam of our lights. Every crack of a branch, every rustle of leaves made me flinch. My chest tightened. The coonhounds were on edge, straining at their leashes, growling at spots where nothing moved. Then I saw it. It was only for a fraction of a second, but I'll never forget it. A massive black shape slipped between the trees like smoke, moving with a fluid grace that seemed almost impossible for an animal of that size. The moonlight caught its eyes, golden, sharp, and unblinking, and I felt a chill run straight to my bones. At first, I thought it was a bear. But the shape was too sleek, too muscular, and the way it moved, silent, predatory, precise, didn't match any bear I'd ever seen. My stomach twisted. The dogs barked and lunged, teeth bared, but their reactions only confirmed what I already feared. This wasn't normal. This was something else. Something dangerous. Before I could react further, it struck. The wampus cat, if that's what it was, leapt with impossible speed. I barely had time to hear the first bark before one of my hounds was gone, snatched into the shadows. The other dogs yelped in terror, circling, lunging, teeth snapping at air as the creature moved like liquid black steel. 3 dogs were attacked in seconds. Their screams pierced the night, echoing through the hollows and turning the hair on my neck to ice. We opened fire, rifles cracking in the dark. The night erupted into chaos, flashes of light, bark and screams, the guttural roars of the thing itself. Bullets tore through the air, but it seemed almost unaffected, vanishing into the darkness after a few moments as quickly as it had appeared. The fog swallowed it, leaving only the echoes of terror in its wake. When the night finally fell quiet again, only 2 of the dogs remained. The rest were gone, vanished like shadows. My friends and I were shaking, adrenaline pumping, unable to comprehend what had just happened. We checked the area thoroughly, scanning the woods with flashlights and rifles, but the thing had disappeared. Only the paw prints remained, enormous and clearly feline, pressed deep into the muddy earth. I remember kneeling in the mud, tracing them with my fingers, disbelief and fear twisting in my gut. No panther I'd ever known left prints that size. No animal in these mountains could move with such lethal precision. And yet the evidence was there, undeniable. The hunters who followed later confirmed what we'd seen. 8 more men scoured the ridges and hollows, finding more tracks, more signs of the creature, but no trace of it itself. Everyone who saw it described the same thing: massive, black, panther-like, lethal. Some called it folklore. Others, like me, knew better. Legends are born from truth, after all. And the Wampus cat wasn't just a story. That night, it was real. Even as I write this now, years later, I can feel the cold dread that settled over us that night. After the first attack, we didn't know what to do. Our dogs were whimpering, circling nervously, still on edge, while the fog crept through the hollows like a living thing. Every snapping twig and distant rustle made us flinch. Something unseen was still out there. We regrouped, rifles raised, flashlights slicing through the dense darkness. The remaining dogs stayed close, noses to the ground, ears pinned back. Then we saw it again. A shadow, massive and black, gliding silently between the trees. Its eyes caught the light, golden, glowing, unblinking. Even from a distance, I could tell it was huge, far larger than any panther I'd ever seen. My chest tightened as my mind refused to accept the reality before me. The creature crouched low, moving closer to the remaining hounds. Its movements were calculated, deliberate, almost intelligent. When it attacked, it did so with horrifying speed. One of the dogs was gone before anyone could react, dragged into the shadows with a guttural growl. The other dog barked frantically, lunging at the unseen predator, but it was useless. The thing moved like a phantom, slipping away before we could even aim properly. Panic surged. We fired again, bullets tearing through the fog, but the creature seemed almost untouchable. We could hear it moving just beyond the reach of the lights, a soft but deadly rustling that sent chills down our spines. Every instinct screamed at us to flee, but the terrain of Jellicoe Mountain is treacherous, steep, and unforgiving, and turning our backs meant certain disaster. Then came the sounds, the growls, the low snarls, the chilling scream of my dogs. They didn't sound like normal animal cries. There was something unnatural in them, something almost human in its intensity. The creature was toying with us, stalking, circling, letting fear do half the work for it. I remember the moment it leapt again. From the edge of the fog, the black form launched itself with impossible speed, landing near one of my friends. We all fired at once. The thunder of rifles echoed off the mountains, our breath catching in terror. When the fog cleared enough to see, the creature was gone, vanished, leaving only the echo of its presence. We stumbled through the mud, searching frantically, calling for the missing dogs. Only 2 were left. The others had disappeared. Tracks led into the dense underbrush, enormous paw prints pressed deep into the earth, far larger than any cougar or panther native to the region. They were perfectly round, with claws that dug into the mud, and each print told a story of strength, speed, and death. We followed the tracks cautiously, flashlights cutting thin beams through the fog. Every step felt wrong, as if the forest itself was shifting around us. Shadows moved where there should have been none. The hairs on my arms stood on end. Bear, my coonhound, stayed close, whining softly, ears twitching. He could sense it too. It wasn't long before we encountered more signs. Trees clawed and scratched, small shrubs crushed, tufts of black fur caught on branches. The creature had passed through here, leaving a trail of destruction, yet it was nowhere to be seen. Every instinct screamed it was still watching, just beyond the edge of our vision. By the time dawn started to break, we were exhausted, muddy, and terrified. We counted the remaining dogs again, shook and trembling, and realized that even though we had survived, the encounter had left us marked. The Wampus cat wasn't a tale to be laughed at around a campfire. It was real, lethal, and intelligent. Later, we spread the story to the locals, and everyone nodded knowingly. Appalachian hunters have always spoken of the Wampus cat, a black, panther-like creature, swift and deadly, roaming the hills and hollows at night. Most dismiss it as folklore, but anyone who stared into those golden eyes knows better. For days after, we scoured the mountains, tracking the paw prints and signs, but the creature had vanished. It left no trace except enormous tracks, flattened underbrush, and the lingering terror it imparted. The dogs that survived were skittish for months, refusing to go out at night, ears constantly alert to sounds we couldn't hear. I couldn't sleep for nights afterward. Every shadow seemed to shift. Every whisper of wind through the trees sounded like a growl, every snap of a branch a warning. And I knew that out there, somewhere in the hollows of Jellicoe Mountain, the Wampus cat still prowled, hunting silently, lethal, and patient. Even now I can feel its presence in the mountains, a predator beyond reason, a reminder that some legends are terrifyingly real. By the next morning, a heavy silence had settled over Jellicoe Mountain. The fog lingered in pockets, curling around the trees like ghostly fingers. We were battered, exhausted, and haunted, not just by what we'd seen, but by what we hadn't. The missing dog, the fleeting shadow of the cat, and most of all, the certainty that something intelligent, predatory, and inhuman had watched us all night. We gathered at the clearing where the attacks had occurred. My hands still shook, fingers tracing the rifle stock as though it could offer some protection against what we had faced. Bear stayed close, tail low, growling softly at every movement in the brush. The remaining hunters, 8 of us, eyes wide and grim, examined the mud. Enormous paw prints were pressed deep into the soft earth, some nearly a foot long, with claws splayed like tiny knives. They led away from the clearing into the dense forest and vanished into the shadows. I knelt, pressing my palm into one of the prints, feeling the indentation of the claws. There was a rhythm to the steps, a deliberate pacing that suggested intelligence, not mindless instinct. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just a wild animal, it was a hunter. And we had been its prey. We followed the trail cautiously. The trees were silent, the usual sounds of the forest absent, as if the mountains themselves were holding their breath. Occasionally a branch would snap, or leaves would rustle unnaturally, making our hearts leap into our throats. Each sign we found, the clawed bark of trees, tufts of black fur, flattened underbrush, reminded us that we were not alone, that something was still here, stalking, watching, calculating. One of my friends spotted it first, a small clearing where the ground was shredded, leaves scattered, and the unmistakable remnants of fur caught on jagged branches. We could see where one of the dogs had been dragged, the earth torn as if by enormous claws. The reality hit us in waves. We had survived by sheer luck. The Wampus cat could have killed us all if it had chosen. We made camp cautiously that night, keeping the remaining dogs close, rifles loaded, eyes scanning the blackness beyond the firelight. Sleep was minimal, fragmented, each snapping twig or rustle of wind, sending us into adrenaline-fueled vigilance. The fog seemed thicker, more oppressive, curling around the trees and licking at our sense of safety. Around midnight, we heard it again. A low, guttural growl, far too deep for any normal predator in these mountains. It moved closer, slinking just beyond the firelight, shadows twisting unnaturally. I shone my flashlight into the forest, sweeping the beams across the trees, but saw nothing. Yet the growl persisted, vibrating through the earth, through my bones, a reminder of the raw power that had stalked us before. The Wampus cat didn't attack that night, but its presence was undeniable. We felt it circling unseen, aware of our every movement. I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just hunting for food. It was testing us, toying with us, demonstrating dominance. The mountain was its territory, and we had trespassed. When dawn finally came, we packed up quickly. The fog had lifted, but the terror lingered. As we retraced our steps to the trailhead, we kept scanning the forest. The paw prints persisted, huge, perfectly formed, a testament to the creature's size and speed. We counted them, measured them, and photographed them as evidence. Every mark reinforced the truth. This was no ordinary animal. By the time we reached the road, silence had returned to Jellicoe Mountain. The Wampus cat had vanished as quickly and silently as it appeared, leaving us shaken, mourning our dogs, and questioning what other predators roamed these hills unseen. The surviving dogs were skittish, ears constantly perked, muscles tensed, refusing to stray far from our side. They had sensed what we could only begin to comprehend. Weeks later, the story spread among local hunters. Everyone had heard the legends, the Wampus cat, a black panther-like creature, stalking Appalachian forests at night, avoiding human contact yet deadly to dogs and anything foolish enough to cross its path. Most dismissed it as folklore, but for those of us who had stared into its eyes, heard its growls, and traced its tracks through the mud, the stories were terrifyingly real. I still remember the sensation of being hunted, the adrenaline so thick it burned through my veins. I still hear the low growl echoing in my mind on quiet nights. And I know that Jellicoe Mountain keeps its secrets well. Somewhere out there in the shadows, the Wampus cat waits, patient, intelligent, and lethal. It may disappear for decades, but it never forgets, and it never forgives. Even now, years later, I hesitate when hunting at night. The forest can feel alive, eyes watching, movements just beyond sight. My dogs react to it too, ears pricked, muscles coiled. They sense the predator that humans can barely comprehend. And every time I pass through those hills, I feel it, the immense, silent presence of the Wampus cat, a reminder that some legends are more than folklore. We survived that night, but the memory lingers. The terror, the loss, the unshakable feeling of being hunted, it stays with you. The Wampus cat of Jellicoe Mountain isn't a story for campfires or tall tales. It is real, it is lethal, and it is still out there. I've always felt drawn to the mountains. There's something about their silence, the way the peaks cut into the sky, that makes me feel both small and infinite at the same time. So when I heard about Grandfather Mountain in North Carolina, the rugged trails, the sweeping views, the legends whispered in hushed voices, I knew I had to go. It was late autumn when I set out, the kind of day where the air feels sharp in your lungs and every breath carries the faint bite of frost. The trail was nearly deserted. A few cars were parked near the entrance, but the woods swallowed any sign of people once I started the climb. The trees, skeletal and bare, creaked as the wind threaded through their branches. A fog was rising, slow and deliberate, curling in the hollows like something alive. I told myself I wanted solitude. That's what I always told myself when I took trips like these. No phone calls, no emails, no noise, just me and the mountain. But solitude has a way of turning on you, of peeling back the layers of your own mind until all that's left is the sound of your own footsteps and the echo of doubts you didn't know you carried. The trail wound steeply upward, rocky and uneven. My boots crunched on loose gravel, and sometimes I had to grab hold of tree roots to steady myself. The higher I climbed, the more the fog thickened, swallowing the view I'd come for. The world shrank to a tunnel of gray mist and dark trees. That's when I heard it. At first it was faint, just the suggestion of another set of footsteps, somewhere above me on the trail. I stopped holding my breath and the sound faded. My ears strained against the silence. Nothing, only the wind. I shook my head, laughing under my breath. The mountain was playing tricks on me. Sound carries strangely in fog, bouncing off rocks and ridges. That was all it was. I pushed on, but the feeling didn't go away. If anything, it grew stronger. Every few minutes I caught the rhythm of steps again, steady, deliberate, always just out of sight. I'd pause and so would they. Start again and the sound returned. A cold knot formed in my stomach. When the trail rounded a bend, I finally saw him. A man stood ahead, maybe 50 yards or so. He was tall with a heavy frame and wore a dark jacket that looked out of place, too old-fashioned, too heavy for the mild weather. His head was bent slightly forward as he climbed, and there was a limp to his step, an awkward dragging of one leg that made each movement look strained. Relief washed over me at first. Another hiker. I wasn't alone. But then the questions came. Why hadn't I seen him earlier? Where had he come from? The parking lot had been nearly empty, and no one had passed me on the trail. I quickened my pace, eager to catch up, maybe exchange a few words, shake off the unease gnawing at me. But no matter how fast I walked, the distance never closed. His figure blurred in the fog, always just out of reach, always moving with that slow, dragging limp. Then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, he was gone. The trail ahead stretched empty, swallowed by fog. No sound of footsteps, no rustle of movement. Just silent. And for the first time since I started climbing, I wished I wasn't alone. I stood there on the trail, staring into the fog where the man had been, my breath puffing out in shaky bursts. Maybe he'd stepped off the path, I told myself. Maybe he'd taken a shortcut or a side trail I hadn't noticed. But the thought didn't sit right. There had been no sound, no crunch of boots, no rustle of branches. Just silence thick and complete. I forced myself forward, telling myself I'd laugh about this later. But the mountains seemed different now. The trees leaned in closer, their branches twisting like grasping fingers. The fog pressed against my skin like damp cloth. My own footsteps sounded too loud, too heavy, as if the forest itself was listening. 100 yards up, I found something that made my stomach turn. Lying on the edge of the trail was an old boot. Its leather was cracked, laces frayed and tangled, the sole peeling away at the heel. It looked decades old, the kind of gear you might see in a museum display about early Appalachian hikers. I nudged it with my toe, half expecting it to crumble into dust, but it held together, solid and real. I glanced around, heart pounding. There was no sign of the man. No footprints leading away, no scuff marks on the trail. Just that boot, sitting there like it had been waiting for me to find it. I left it where it was and moved on, quicker now. Every instinct screamed at me to get off that mountain, but something kept me climbing. Maybe it was pride, maybe curiosity, maybe something else entirely, something I couldn't name. The fog grew denser as the trail narrowed. My world shrank to a gray corridor with walls of trees pressing in from either side. That's when I heard it again, the footsteps. This time they were closer, much closer. I spun around, flashlight beam cutting through the mist. And there he was, the same man maybe 20 feet behind me. His jacket hung heavy and damp, his shoulders slumped. His face was shadowed, obscured by the fog, but I saw the limp, the dragging shuffle of his left. My throat went dry. "Hey," I called out, my voice cracking in the silence. He didn't answer, didn't even pause, just kept walking slow and deliberate, dragging that leg. I stepped toward him, raising a hand. "You okay? Do you need help?" Still nothing. His head stayed bowed, movement steady, like he hadn't even heard me. My skin prickled with cold. Then without a sound, he veered off the trail and into the trees. I scrambled after him, pushing through branches, my boots slipping on mossy rocks. But the forest swallowed him whole. One moment he was there, the next gone. No crackle of underbrush, no fading footsteps. Just empty wood. My breath came fast and ragged. The fog muffled everything, swallowing sound, making it impossible to tell where he'd gone. I turned in a slow circle, flashlight trembling in my hand. Nothing. When I finally stumbled back onto the trail, something caught my eye. Another footprint. It was pressed deep into the mud at the trail's edge, clear and undeniable. But the boot print wasn't fresh. It looked worn, weathered, edges soft, as though it had been there for years. And yet I had just watched him step off the trail. A shiver ran down my spine. I kept moving, faster now, pushing myself up the mountain, desperate for open space, for any break in the suffocating fog. My pulse thundered in my ears, each step carrying me higher and higher. And then I saw him again. This time he was ahead of me, standing at a bend where the trail curved sharply around a sheer drop. He was motionless, his back to me, shoulders slumped as though carrying an unbearable weight. "Hey," my voice cracked, raw with fear and frustration. "What do you want?" Slowly, almost painfully, he turned. For a moment, I wished he hadn't. His face was pale, drained of color, skin stretched tight over sharp bones. His eyes were hollow, sunken pits that caught the dim light and reflected it back like dull glass. His mouth opened as if to speak, but no sound came. Only silence, deeper and heavier than before, pressing down on me until my knees trembled. And then in the space of a blink, he was gone. The trail was empty. The bend ahead stretched bare and silent. My flashlight beam cut through nothing but fog. But I wasn't alone. I could feel it, eyes on me, heavy and unrelenting, following me with every step. I didn't run, not yet. Some part of me still clung to reason, to the idea that what I was seeing had a logical explanation. A trick of the fog, exhaustion, stress. But deep down, I knew better. The mountain was showing me something it had hidden from the rest of the world, and I was powerless to turn away. I pressed on, the trail narrowing as it snaked along the ridge. To my left, the ground dropped away into a sheer, endless void swallowed by fog. To my right, the trees leaned close, their bare branches scratching against one another with a sound like bones grinding together. Every step forward felt like walking into a trap. The silence pressed on me, heavy and suffocating. Even my own footsteps seemed muted, swallowed by the mist. That's when the whispers began. At first, they were faint, so soft I thought they were just the wind. But the longer I listened, the clearer they became. Low, broken syllables, fragments of words I couldn't quite make out. They came from all around me, slipping between the trees, curling in the fog, threading into my ears like smoke. I froze, straining to hear. My heart pounded so loudly, it nearly drowned them out. And then just for a moment, I thought I recognized a word: leave. The air went colder. My breath plumed white in front of me. That's when I saw him again. He was crouched at the edge of the trail, one knee bent, his hand pressed against the ground as though he were searching for something. His head jerked up at the sound of my approach, and even through the fog I saw the emptiness in his eyes, the hollow sockets that seemed to swallow the light. I wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at me to flee. But my legs moved of their own accord, carrying me a few steps closer, as though pulled by invisible strings. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice breaking. "What do you want?" He rose slowly, painfully, like an old man burdened with centuries of weight. His pale lips moved, forming shapes without sound. His gaze locked on mine, and in that instant I felt something cold and heavy slide into my chest, like a hand gripping my heart. Then he lifted one arm and pointed. Ahead, the trail bent sharply to the left, hugging the cliffside. Through the fog, I could just make out a jagged edge where the ground seemed to crumble away. My stomach dropped. If I hadn't slowed, if I had kept walking blindly, I would have gone over. I blinked, tearing my eyes from the drop. And when I looked back, he was gone. The forest was empty again. The whispers faded, leaving only silence. My body shook violently, adrenaline burning in my veins. I staggered back from the edge, gasping, tears stinging my eyes. Why had he stopped me? Why lead me to the cliff only to spare me? The thought churned in my mind, more terrifying than any monster. Because if he had once been human, if he had once walked this trail like me, then maybe he hadn't meant to haunt. Maybe he was trapped, warning others in the only way he could. Or maybe, just maybe, he was waiting for someone to join him. I don't remember much of the descent. Only the constant sensation of eyes on me, watching from the fog, pressing against the back of my skull. When I finally stumbled into the parking lot, the world seemed too bright, too empty. My car was the only one left. The mountain loomed behind me, silent and patient, like it knew I would return someday. That night, lying awake, I searched for answers. Old forums, local legends, fragments of stories from hikers who had seen him too. They all described the same thing: a silent figure, outdated gear, a limp, vanishing without a trace. Some said he was the ghost of a man who had fallen to his death decades ago. Others swore he was a guardian spirit, guiding hikers away from danger. I don't know which is true. All I know is this: he was real. I saw him. He saw me. And on Grandfather Mountain, when the fog rises and the trails go silent, he's still out there, walking alone, waiting for the next soul to cross his path. Sleep never came that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him, standing in the fog, pointing with that pale hand, his hollow eyes fixed on me. The more I thought about it, the less sure I was of what I'd experienced. Had he saved me from the cliff, or had he been luring me to it? The next morning, against every shred of common sense, I went back. The sky was clear this time, the sun casting long golden fingers through the trees. The fog was gone, burned away by the light. The mountain looked different, less like a living thing and more like what it was: rock, dirt, and trees. But I couldn't shake the sense of being watched. The trail was quiet but not silent. Birds called from the branches. Squirrels darted through the underbrush. My boots crunched steadily against gravel. Still, every step made my chest tighter. When I reached the bend where I'd seen him last, I stopped. In daylight, I could see it clearly. The trail curved sharply, and the cliff dropped off into a sheer wall of stone and empty air. A slip there, especially in fog, would be fatal. I crouched and studied the ground. At first, there was nothing unusual, just dirt, leaves, and a scattering of pebbles. But then I saw it, a boot print. The edges were faint, weathered, but unmistakable. The same old-fashioned tread I'd seen before. The sole was narrow, the heel uneven, as if worn down by decades of use. My throat went dry. That print was real, which meant he was real. I stood there for a long time, staring at it, the wind tugging at my jacket. A single thought echoed in my mind: maybe he wasn't gone. Maybe he never left this trail. And then, faint as a breath, I heard it, the whisper. It rose from nowhere, curling through the trees, so soft I thought it was only the wind. But it was. It carried shape, mining. Just one word stretched thin and broken: stay. The air turned cold, biting through my clothes. The sunlight dimmed as though the mountain had drawn a curtain across the sky. My heart hammered, my instincts screaming at me to leave. I ran. I tore down the trail, lungs burning, vision blurred, the trees flashing past in a rush of green and brown. The whisper followed me, growing fainter the farther I fled, until at last it was gone, swallowed by the wind. When I finally stumbled into the parking lot, gasping and trembling, I swore I'd never set foot on that mountain again. But sometimes, on nights when fog curls low across the valleys, when the wind rattles the windows and the world goes silent, I feel it. The same cold, heavy presence. The same hollow gaze pressing against me from somewhere unseen. And I know he's still out there. The phantom hiker of Grandfather Mountain. Trapped between the trail and the void. Waiting for the next lost soul to follow his steps into the fog. Adams, Tennessee, October 1817. I take pen in trembling hand, for I fear if I do not set these occurrences to paper, I may lose my very wits. We are a God-fearing household, and I have never placed stock in idle superstition. Yet what has transpired within these walls cannot be explained by reason, nor dismissed as folly. It is as though some wicked thing has taken up residence among us. The disturbances began quietly, so much so that we thought little of them at first. Scratching sounds, faint and irregular, as if mice scurried between the walls. A knocking here and there, sometimes upon the floorboards, sometimes upon the door when none stood outside. My father, John Bell, set traps for vermin and inspected the timber for rot, but found nothing. Then came the whispers. Low, rasping murmurs that seemed to float from the corners of the room, just as we drifted toward sleep. I would strain my ears, but the words were never clear, only the shape of them, like speech carried on the wind. At times it sounded as though my own name was spoken, or that of my sister Betsy. It unsettled us, yet still we sought mundane explanation. The wind, perhaps, or our tired minds conjuring illusions after a long day's labor. We are farmers and our work is honest, yet it leaves the body weary and the mind prone to trickery. But soon matters worsened. One evening, as the family gathered near the fire, a loud thud shook the very walls of the house. My mother clutched her Bible and my father leapt to his feet, lantern in hand, believing some mischief maker had hurled a stone at our dwelling. He went outside, but the night lay silent, the yard empty. The door, which had been firmly latched, swung open on its own, the iron catch undone. I confess I felt a chill then such as no autumn air could account for. Days passed and the disturbances did not cease. The covers were torn from our beds in the dark hours of the morning. A heavy weight pressed upon my chest as though unseen hands sought to smother me in my sleep. Once I awoke to the sensation of fingers tangling in my hair, pulling until I cried out. When my mother lit the lamp, there was nothing there, only the sound of laughter fading into the shadows. My father forbade us to speak of these matters outside the household, lest we invite ridicule or slander. Yet word spreads quickly in a town as small as Adams, and soon neighbors whispered of strange goings-on at the Bell farm. Some pitied us, others warned that we had drawn the wrath of a witch. I do not know what to believe. I only know that when darkness falls, our house no longer feels like our own. Something unseen moves through these halls, listening, watching. At times I feel it at my very shoulder, a breath cold as the grave stirring the hair at the nape of my neck. If this be the work of man, then he is cunning beyond measure. But if it be the work of spirit, then God help us, for I fear no mortal means may drive it out. November 1817. The fiend that haunts our household grows bolder with each passing day. No longer are its whispers confined to the shadows, now it speaks aloud, mocking our very existence. I have heard it call the names of my siblings, repeating our voices in grotesque imitation. It mimics my mother's gentle tone, only to twist it into a harsh command or a cruel taunt. My father has sought counsel from neighbors, ministers, and learned men, yet none can offer a satisfactory explanation. A preacher from the county arrived one night, declaring that he would confront this evil in the name of the Almighty. He prayed aloud, sprinkled holy water upon the floors, and recited scripture. For a moment the house seemed still, as though the spirit feared his presence. But soon enough the knocking resumed, louder now, pounding in rhythm against the walls and ceiling, and a voice hissed from the darkness, "You cannot drive me hence." Betsy, my sister, has borne the brunt of the torment. She awakes screaming, her hair tangled in unseen hands, her body bruised in strange patterns that bear no trace of earthly cause. Once a chair lifted from the floor and struck her, though no one in the room had moved. I have tried to intervene, but the moment I approach, the force recoils, focusing its attention upon me, scratching, clawing, pressing us to the brink of terror. Neighbors have begun to witness the phenomena themselves. Aunts and uncles who once scoffed now tremble at our threshold. Ministers declare it an unholy spirit, yet even they confess to fear, for none can fully endure the manifestation of such malevolence. Strange lights are seen flickering in the windows at night, and some swear that shadowy figures drift along the edge of the trees, just beyond the lamplight. I have kept vigil more nights than I can count. I sit with the candle flickering, my eyes darting at every movement, every shadow, every sigh carried on the wind. The spirit delights in teasing us. It will snatch objects from our grasp, rattle doors, and even speak of events yet to occur. My father once questioned it, asking what it desired. The answer came in a whisper carried on the chill air, "John Bell, you shall know me soon." That words chilled my very marrow. It is not simply cruelty, but something far darker. It learns, it waits, and it strikes with precision. Even our strongest men are powerless against it. I have begun to dread the night, to tremble at the simple thought of closing my eyes. Each groan from the floorboards, each scratch along the walls, sends my heart leaping into my throat. Yet still I must remain. I cannot abandon my family to this unholy thing. Each time I hear its laughter, hollow and shrill, I remind myself that it is a test of our faith. I cling to scripture, to prayers, to the hope that the Almighty will intervene. But I fear that the Spirit knows more than we do. It moves freely through our home, appearing and vanishing at will, leaving only signs of its presence, bruises, torn cloth, broken furniture, and a sense of eyes upon us, even when no one stands near. I have begun to write these accounts not only to preserve the truth, but to remind myself that the world outside our walls continues, that there is a life untouched by this horror. Yet each time I lay down my pen, I hear the whispers once more, carrying my name, promising more suffering, warning of fate yet to come. The Bell Witch is no mere poltergeist. It is patient, clever, and cruel. And I fear, as the days lengthen into nights, that its power grows stronger still. December 1817. The malice of the spirit has grown unbearable. No longer are we merely plagued by sounds or whispers. it now strikes with deliberate intent. My father, John Bell, once a man of unshakable composure, has begun to tremble when alone in a room. He is bruised and scratched, his hair pulled in the night by invisible hands. One evening, while reading aloud from scripture, he was struck so forcefully that he fell to the floor, gasping and unable to rise for several minutes. The spirit's voice echoed mockingly through the house, repeating his cries in a grotesque parody. Betsy fares even worse. Each night she awakens to find herself pinned beneath the covers, bruised and shaken. The entity whispers to her, often in a voice she recognizes as my mother's, coaxing and commanding in equal measure. On several occasions, objects have been hurled at her with precision, striking walls, chairs, and once even the hearth, yet leaving no mark of the thrower. Even the servants who once laughed at the Bell Witch as a tale for children now speak in hushed tones, refusing to linger in certain rooms after sunset. A minister visited once more, attempting an exorcism. His prayers were answered with shrieks and knocks so violent they splintered the doorframe. It seemed the spirit relished these displays, testing our resolve, mocking our faith. I have tried to keep records of its words, for they are as chilling as its deeds. Often it speaks directly to John Bell, foretelling misfortune. "You shall know me soon," it hissed one night, the sound slithering through the candlelight. Betsy cries when it whispers to her, "You cannot escape me." Its threats carry the weight of certainty, as though the events themselves are preordained. The household is a place of constant fear. Windows rattle despite calm winds, the walls thump and groan in time with some unseen heartbeat. At times, I glimpse shadows that do not belong to any living being, moving across corners or through hallways before dissolving into the darkness. Sleep has become impossible. Even a candlelit vigil cannot shield us from the presence that haunts every nook and cranny. What disturbs me most is the intelligence it displays. It learns, adapts, and punishes. When we attempt to flee or seek outside help, it appears in our absence, leaving evidence of its reach: bruises, toppled furniture, and eerie laughter. On one night, a neighbor ventured to investigate, only to find the house silent and empty. Yet when he approached, a fierce wind burst from the windows, sending him stumbling backward in terror. We are prisoners within our own home. The Bell Witch is no longer a creature of random mischief. It is a calculated, malevolent force. John Bell's health declines under the constant assault, his body bruised, his sleep stolen, his mind fraying at the edges. Betsy's youth and innocence are assaulted nightly, leaving her trembling and fearful. I write these words as witness and record, yet I wonder if they will suffice to capture the true horror. There are moments when I sense it standing just beyond my vision, unseen yet palpably near, watching, calculating, waiting. The air grows heavy in its presence, a tangible pressure that sets my teeth on edge and chills my marrow. As winter approaches, the terror intensifies. The Bell Witch strikes with greater precision, greater cruelty. Its voice is no longer only a whisper. It commands, scolds, and taunts, as though it knows the limits of our endurance and delights in testing them. And yet the question persists: why John Bell? Why Betsy? Why us? I can only record what I witness, pray for deliverance, and hope that the Almighty has not abandoned us entirely. January 1820. It has come to pass, as I feared, that the Bell Witch has claimed its most dreadful victory. My father, John Bell, once a pillar of strength and reason, now lies dead under circumstances none can fully explain. His health had waned under the ceaseless torment, but his death was neither illness nor accident, so all who witnessed it agree. The spirit's presence was felt that night, cold and palpable, as though the air itself had turned against us. Betsy and I remained in the room when it happened. A chill descended, heavier than any winter air, and the candles flickered violently. Shadows stretched across the walls, writhing, almost human in form. We heard the voice clearly then, hissing from corners unseen: "The master shall fall. His time is ended." My father's final moments were punctuated by groans and gasps that seemed amplified by some otherworldly force. By the time the light of dawn touched the windows, he was gone. The household descended into a state of mourning, intertwined with fear. The Bell Witch did not cease its activity with my father's death. If anything, it grew bolder. It mocked our grief, laughing in empty rooms, dragging objects across floors, and continuing its torment of Betsy and me. Even neighbors reported strange happenings near the farm. Lights moving without source, odd sounds echoing in the night, and shadows that fled when approached. I often ponder the purpose of this evil. Some say it is punishment for sins unknown, others claim it is a restless soul seeking vengeance. Whatever its reason, the terror is real, and its cunning undeniable. Those who once laughed at our plight now whisper in fear, recalling tales of the Bell Witch with awe and dread. I record these events not merely for posterity, but as a warning. Forces exist in this world beyond human understanding, and they are patient, relentless, and cruel. The Bell Witch is more than legend. It is an enduring presence that has left its mark on this land and on the hearts of all who dwell here. Even now, as I write, I feel a weight pressing upon my shoulders, an invisible gaze that chills the blood. The mountain winds outside carry whispers, soft and threatening, as though the spirit is near. I do not know if this will ever end, or if the Bell Witch has claimed Adams as its eternal dominion. I pray that these words serve as testament to the truth, that the Bell Witch was not mere tale, not superstition, but a force of darkness that walked among us, unseen yet undeniable, leaving terror and sorrow in its wake. And though John Bell lies at rest, we remain ever aware, ever vigilant, for the Bell Witch watches still.